Okay, welcome everybody to the Monday, June 3rd Select Board meeting. Will you join me in saying the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first up, Ryan has the general fund warrant. Excuse me. We do the general fund warrant dated today. And the total amount on the general fund warrant is $53,527.65. Most of it's health insurance per usual, and then there was about $11,600 or so to different charges, equipment repairs and parts for the fleet. Look through those, lots of stuff, nothing stuck out to me as that shouldn't be there. So I would move that we pass the general fund warrant as presented.
So, a second?
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Brendan, you have the fire department reserve warrant and you got another one.
Yeah, ARPA and fire department. So the fire department reserve, warrant dated June 3rd, 2024 is in the amount of $3,365. And it's well, it looks like there'd been a back ordered item when we equipped the new E1 ladder. So that's just a case and some accessories for a tool that's on that truck by the looks of it. And then we've got a federal ARPA fund warrant that Anna and all of us are really excited about. It's in the amount of $125,225, and the warrant dated June 3rd, 2024. And it is all related to us digitizing our land records and going with a new virtual town hall that will help Anna and everyone that wants to access our land records.
This is going back to, is it 1882? Is that
Yeah.
the date
40
somewhere
years.
on there? 40 years.
Back 40 years. And we
Well,
were,
40 years, isn't that like the 1960s?
yeah.
Is that, oh, God, 1980s or 40 years ago.
Used to be.
It's
yeah,
crazy.
1900s.
Sorry, I didn't, sorry.
Are we,
When I was young.
my only question before making a motion to approve both of these is if, are we still gonna look into what it might cost to have the zoning records done at the same time?
Yeah, they can't, it has to be a separate company. We asked to do it with them, but they can't. I can't quite do that.
We're gonna look into that and maybe do that too.
Mhm.
Okay, list your cards and all that fun.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'll make a motion, we approve both these warrants as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Jeff, you have the payroll warrant.
Yep, I have two payroll warrants. The first one is dated May 24th from the pay period of May 13th through the 19th, and that's in the amount of $26,494.11. That's pretty standard. And then the second one is May 31st, dated May 31st, 2024, and for the pay period of May 20th through the 26th. That one is in the amount of $49,406.73. And it reflects a bunch of agency checks. And I think I received an email that says like a reconciliation for the retirement funds. Yeah, so that's why that one is larger, and I would make a motion that we approve these warrants as presented.
Second.
Yeah, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, in your packet, you have the minutes of May 14th. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Yep, I'll second that. Okay.
Short, by the way.
Short minutes. It was short minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public comment. Anybody want to come up for a public comment?
Come on.
No, you good? Okay, perfect. Oh, just don't say your name though.
There's a meeting tomorrow night. You guys are-
Yeah.
We're very happy about that.
Okay. Next up, town manager's report. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah. I'd like to call up Representative Dickinson and Casey Tooth. They'd like to come up and give their updates. Meant to put you up. before me on the agenda.
Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear us if we just talk or?
Yep.
That means-
Just do it in there, just in case Jen needs to hear it for the minutes, because she's not on, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Trying to make 100,000 listeners in our next one, so.
That's
Hopefully we bring some in.
You better be good.
Yeah, we want to really thank you for letting us come here tonight. This was a very unusual, a really interesting session. Every kind of, we had a lot of bills that went through very quickly at the very end. I mean, every kind of bill that you can think of that was trying to either raise money, spend money, or do something seemed to come up almost all the way through, but certainly in the last couple of days.
And we passed 100 bills this year and 60 of them in the last week, 38 on the last day.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there's quite a bit.
Just to give you some reference, I sit on.
Well thought out planned bills, right?
Yes, not too much, but. Yeah, so I sit on appropriations. Every bill that has any kind of expenditure goes into appropriations. Other bills that have money in it that the state will have to raise or that will have to, be spending. Not raise, but spend is reviewed by appropriations. So we see a lot of bills, we don't get into the policy, but we do see anything. And we did take some money out of the bills because we just don't have the money we used to have, the federal money in it. So we were back to sort of a more normal time. The budget was worked on and, we had bills that spent money that also had taxes attached to it, usually what you spend as appropriations, and that's done by appropriations. And that's in your appropriations bill. And what you tax is in the Ways and Means taxes, the meal bill, for instance, for the schools and other miscellaneous taxes. But they kept putting taxes into other bills that were including appropriations. So it was a very interesting kind of dynamic trying to figure out how to do this. Fortunately, the Senate cleaned that up a lot. We ended up sort of making it more palatable and realistic as far as our spending was concerned. And so it was really a pretty decent appropriations bill.
It stuck more, the Senate version that we ended up agreeing with, was along the lines with the governor's recommended budget. It was closer to that than what the House proposed. That was pretty refreshing.
Yes, so that was good. Some of the things that we had, of course, was the first thing that we had happen, what didn't happen really till the end of the session, was the justice-involved juvenile facility that, of course, we had a meeting about last year from here. That eventually, at the very end of the session, they had signed an agreement with the city of Virgins, and it will be in Virgins on state-owned land, which is what they wanted. So there's a therapeutic issue to this. I'm not sure, but it was, again, a temporary fix, but that's down in Virgins. So that was good. The local option tax that they wanted to study, I did talk to one of the guys from Ways and Means today, and, you know, they wanted to do a study of local option tax so they could socialize it across the state. And that, I'm not sure the study made it into anything. And the other thing was they wanted to take away the fact that it has to be in a charter and you can just vote on it administratively as a council or as a select board to create a local option tax. And I'm not sure exactly what the status of those are. He couldn't remember, but they were the ideas floating around. But if they didn't make it into a bill, they're dead for now. And I think a lot of towns would like a local option tax because the same reason that we have one. So we also had I gave you out the information on the code of ethics that included H 875, which includes section 22 onward, is the municipal ethics. This was not supported by the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, but they passed it and sent it to the governor anyway. I don't know if he signed it yet, but that does put a lot more of a burden on municipalities. Some municipalities, the larger ones there, already have their code of ethics and they already have some of these procedures in place. But for a lot of the smaller towns, it's going to be a real wake-up call. You know, small towns where the chair of the board functions as the town manager, and one of the guys on the select board is the road commissioner. You know, it's going to be a little different for them because they don't have the manpower or the resources to really figure out how to go through all this. It's a very prescriptive bill. Tells you exactly what you should do, who you should do it, why you should do it. And so that was That was out of the Government Operations Committee. See, we also have a Act 250 update. I believe it's page 687. This created tiers for, and I think the governor might veto this one.
Yeah.
There he already has. It creates 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 would not be subject to as much Act 250, but what it really requires in a word is it needs like a downtown, designated village, and all those other kinds of designations. More of a, established settlement area. But it also requires water and public sewers, wastewater. And if you don't have that, then you're going to jump into either tier 2 or tier 3. Tier 2 is neither tier 1 nor tier 3. Tier 3 is the majority of the state that doesn't have access to this, and every kind of permit will require an Act 250 review. Tier 2 are ones that might be more like the existing 250. It builds on the bill that we passed last year. We didn't vote for it, but that was the attempt to go and conserve land. It was called 30 by 30, 50 by 50, where they want to preserve 30% of the land by 2030, 50% of the land by 2050. It looks at forest fragmentation and other features that was important to the people who developed that bill. So it builds on that.
That's a question, Jonathan. All right.
Representative Dixon, St. Albans Town, would we have parts that are in tier 1, 2, and 3, or just
Yeah.
1 and
Because it
2?
breaks it down into set tracks within towns, right? Is that, so it wouldn't be like a town, it'd be a portion, yeah.
That's, I mean, would our town though include areas that are all 3 of those tiers?
Could have a couple of different tiers in the town.
We
You don't
have,
have water and sewer available to parts of the town. Then you will be in either tier
Sure.
2 or tier 3, most likely tier 3. We have a village designation here down at the bay. And you could build, I think it's like 50 units within a quarter of a mile of that.
Yeah.
But you need wastewater, water and wastewater.
I
So
We don't
is
have it.
that last part though, so I talked to NRPC about this, because we don't have water wastewater. They said the exemption for the village would not require the water sewer.
It wouldn't.
Yeah, which I mean, it doesn't matter, because you're not
Yeah,
gonna build
you're not gonna
anything
build-
with that, but
Jonathan.
yeah.
so he's gonna veto that?
I
I don't know if he already did, I can check his.
Yeah, yeah.
Cause I had a tutorial last fall on it, and it's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
Well, I just,
It's completely idiotic.
Yeah.
I can elaborate on this part, this bill, so we've talked to thousands of people in the last few years, and we have 3 big issues, right, that are facing the state. Affordability, like taxes and, the cost of living, then number 2 is housing, and number 3 is public safety. And housing, will save a lot of issues it'll save your, account or your affordability issue, right? You grow your grand list, you have more people contributing to the grand list, and your property taxes will go down in theory, because you have more people paying for the system. This Act 250 bill, the legislature didn't touch any housing bill at all until after town meeting day, because we took an Act 250 bill that only allows 3% of the state to be developed. And the other 97% of the state has to go through a very strenuous Act 250 planning. So it's actually I consider it an anti-housing bill. And they tack those on in the Senate. They're like, well, we'll let the Senate tack it on. The Senate tacked on a little bit. But then when it came back to us, it was last night, we were there at 8 o'clock. They gave us a 170-page bill to read in an hour and have dinner to pass this. And in that bill, there were so many things that we just didn't understand, first of all, and did not agree with, because places like parts of St. Albans Town won't benefit, but some parts will. And it takes some of the local zoning and throws it away, and kind of handcuffs you to what the state wants. But we need housing. I feel like the legislature's been pushing, they want to build up, they don't want to build out. I'll tell you, a colleague of mine on House Education turned to me and said, well, all due respect, we don't want housing in Franklin County, because you drive to Chittenden County for your jobs. And that contributes to climate change, so if we should focus on building in our downtown, but the problem is, we want to be able to bring jobs in. In order to bring jobs in, we need housing for people that, we've seen this all over the place. I'm on several boards and we can't find, doctors can't come in, therapists, people can't come in because there's no place for them to live. And this bill really only benefits those in Champlain Valley, in your larger areas, and it doesn't help, any of your rural. Another thing is, they always talk about like our housing, or our school budgets, we need to close like schools that have 20 kids in them. But if we don't allow municipalities to build housing in their towns, we're gonna force them to close those schools anyway because they can't grow their population. So it's like counterproductive to what we really want. St. Albans Town's been very lucky that we've grown in population in the last 10 years. While the rest of the state seemed to decline, but we could still use more, opportunities for us to build housing. I was on the planning commission. I was the chair of the planning commission for a few years, and we have some responsible people that are making really good decisions on our planning and how we should build. And I like that we have that here in St. Albans Town, but I wasn't a big fan. I guess what I'm trying to say is I wasn't a big fan of that bill.
So based on what you're saying, by 2050, half of Vermont's population would live in Chittenden County.
Well, 50% of the land has to be conserved.
So
Yeah, I'm just,
Yeah.
going what you're saying.
that 30 by 30, 50 by 50, I've been very active from an agricultural point of view in that, and I've read the bill several times, and it's essentially cut straight out of the UN. It's what the UN sees, how the UN sees the world. They want to be first in Vermont. So they actually go so far as to talk about like doing away with roads and connecting the rural area. They really want people living in urban centers.
Yeah.
Like that's their thing. And then there's all kinds of talk about how to conserve that land and how does that grow housing? The more land you conserve, the more expensive housing.
And yeah, it makes it more expensive. That's the other thing is you
So-
conserve the land, and now the piece of land, there's already so few of it available. Makes it harder and more expensive to build, so affordable housing is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Only if it's done by a nonprofit.
So they spent years trying to reform Act 250. And they just don't seem to get what the problem is. It's always been, oh, it takes so long, it takes so long. It doesn't take that long. When we get done with it, it goes to A&R, historian, and every one of those has got 45 days. It goes through our board. We get all the stuff on email, we look at all the maps, and we do it as a minor or major. We might look it over, it might take us 2 weeks where everybody decides what to do, and then it's gone. And it's in all these other departments all over this Montpelier. That's where the holdup is, not us. But nobody seems to get that.
Well, it changes it to a place-based jurisdiction, which is where you come up with these 3 tiers. And so tier 1, basically 20 to 50 municipalities would fit into this tier and would leave Act 250 altogether. Those are like designated downtowns. Tier 1B would be, they would fit into this for their core so long as they don't opt out, and it would exempt housing development under 50 units on less than 10 acres. Tier 3 consists of critical resource areas where any activity within will more than likely trigger 250 jurisdiction. It cover about 18% of the state's land mass, I think maybe more than that. And then tier 2 is essentially anything not described yet that would have a road rule that triggers 250 if a road's more than 800 feet. And new criteria exist for forest fragmentation, which is an issue they've been talking with. The environmental groups have been talking about. So basically, it's none of this is mapped. There's no maps for any of this. Usually when you get a bill, whether it's a financial bill for your school or a thing for taxes, you go through your district or your school board or whatever municipalities, you would see a map or an analysis by Joint Fiscal Office of the impact on your community. There are no maps for any of this. And that's before you vote, usually you get this, but no one has any maps. That's something yet to be determined in the future. So
So
how
can
it
I,
will impact you
can I
is
blow up?
totally.
So when I testified on 687 Senate Natural Resources, you came up, and I read that bill, the quagmire bill that it was at that time, and now is more so than it was then. And it delegated the power to come up with the 3 tiers to regional planning commissions. Is that still the case?
I don't think so.
I don't know that the,
Yeah.
they did
Oh.
mention the Senate that in time, a municipality could change or could request that it no longer be tier 3, that they could expand maybe another tier.
But the text of the bill that I read was that it would be referred to regional planning for until a certain date. And it gave them maybe 2 or 3 years to come up with a map that for their area that they covered. And it made me flag that right at the time if it passed, that we really needed to spend all of our energy in NRPC for the short term.
Yeah. There's,
And
yeah.
and then my other thought was, like setting legislative agenda, like our goals for the next session. I ran into a roadblock and I'll describe what it was, and I think it'll lead you to the goal that we really need to try to get. I bought, if you look at our zoning map, it'd be in this room, but if you look at the zoning map, it has an overlay for a growth center. And the previous housing bill, the home, what was it, Home Act or whatever, came out of Keisha's. Yeah, so that bill gave, growth centers with municipal water and sewer Act 250 exemptions up to 25 units. So my thought as an investor and somebody that sees everybody stuck in a housing crisis was, how can I create 24 units in an area that has affordable land, and that'll get me that exemption, so I can get it online within like 18 months to 2 years from start to finish. So I found our zoning map after going through a couple other towns, trying to steer outside of St. Albans Town, being that I sit on this board, but I landed in our growth center. Found a property, took a purchase option on it, started forming a design and permitting team, and then ran into the roadblock that on our zoning map, it's called a growth center, but it's not a state recognized growth center. It's just a designate, it's not state recognized, and it can't be recognized. It meets every other parameter of a state recognized growth center, but the downtown that it's adjacent to, which allows it to become a growth center in the first place, is not located in the same jurisdiction, which means it can't claim the downtown as its own, which means it can't be state recognized, which means I'm subject to Act 250 on that property. It would be great to broaden the definition of a downtown so that we could create like 3 of them in St. Albans Town where we want high density growth. In the meantime, it'd be awesome if we could declare the city's downtown as ours for the purpose of being state recognized. If we could do either or both of those 2 things, we would be off to the races in 5 minutes. You've got municipal leaders in other towns around our area saying there's market failures. There's not market failures, there's bureaucracy. Jack alluded to it. You can get an Act 250 permit, and 3 months to 2 years, depending what you run into in the regulatory process, and it's never with the district commission. It's always with folks in the back end making comments. If you could get us out of that by making a couple of those tweaks, and we can sit down and figure out what is the most prescriptive definition that would work throughout other areas of the state that we know will work in 3 or 4 different areas of St. Albans Town. And then just go for that language. And then, if we hit a dead end there, can't get that through, then we look at, okay, well, maybe we can just strike that the downtown has to be in the same jurisdiction as a backup. Because if we got that, then we could, the north and south growth centers by our interstate exits, you'd have people building dense housing up there and helping alleviate this bottleneck in the rental market. I mean, if we had someone here, industrial development leader, and he said no one wants to work. And I really think that's not the case. I think people don't want to work, for $23 an hour on a 3rd shift at Barry Calabo, and then go home to a 2-bedroom apartment that costs them $1,900 a month plus utilities. It's not sustainable. So they're moving to other areas to work. And so if we want our industrial park to grow, we need housing. We all know this. So that's my That's my tag.
Yeah, I did find that it amends the statute which establishes the Natural Resources Board, which is the NRB, and it changes its name to the Land Use Review Board, the LURB. And the LURB.
Well, that helps.
Well, not
That really
necessarily.
helps speed it up.
Anyway, it says that the LURB will make recommendations for adjustments to the jurisdictional triggers used within tier 2. It basically takes the place of the Natural Resources Board. But that's what the institution will be, and it will probably have people nominated. It will be nominating, it will be 2 members of the executive branch appointed by the governor, 1 from the Department of HR, 2 members of the House appointed by the Speaker, 2 members of the Senate appointed by the Committee on Committees. That will be the nominating committee, and then they will nominate the people to this Land Use Review Board. But that will be the board that will be tasked with, these will be full-time people who will be tasked with setting up the tiers and the rules and regulations and where they are and all that.
So it's like one care for land use.
So it sounds like you're just adding layers of bureaucracy.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like everyone acknowledges the issues that have been brought up, but the legislature in general ignores the issue. They aren't trying to solve anything.
Well,
They're muddying the waters by making things complex.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like they're trying to make it easier only in places that are already really developed, right? Like, so it sounds like Burlington, you could probably build a
Yeah.
seven-story tower now, but in Bakersfield, you can't build anything.
Correct.
Right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I-
So we're making it easier only in, you said 12 municipalities or
Yeah.
14 or whatever?
Municipalities could fit into the tier 1A.
And I'm assuming St. Albans Town doesn't qualify based on
There's a tiny
what you're
portion.
saying. That's a
That
tiny
might.
portion.
Yeah, that might, but it's,
That you're gonna have to figure it, someone's gonna have to figure that out and then get permission, go through all. That just stifles growth.
So,
It really
You
just.
know, what we've had in the last few months, good examples, we've had projects. We give it to go ahead, then it goes to all the other little towns. And you think of all the state employees, they could get it done, but no, we're looking for, we have to have the permit in so many days. Well, like A&R gets it, or regional planning. They call, at the last day, they say, oh, we need 2 weeks extension. Because everybody thinks, well, that's the Act 250 board's dragging their feet. And they've had all this time to look at it. And they haven't done their job.
Who grants the extension in that situation, Jack?
We have to say, yes, or no, you've had enough time.
And how often do you,
Sometimes we say, no, it's done.
and you're like,
How that you could fix that? Is if they don't act on it, it's approved.
But we have,
Automatic.
well, I mean, that's.
If they don't comment, if they don't say no, it's a yes.
But they wait till the last minute. These have so many dates. Each one of these outfits has so many dates.
like,
It's so that they don't give up.
But people are getting crushed in the housing market. Like we
Well,
need to alleviate that, not make rules.
Well, I also,
Look at what happens when you get a delay. Okay, so it pushes the window of construction, well, all of a sudden we're into winter.
Yeah.
But we can't go to next year. So the price of materials
Or the interest rate
skyrockets.
goes
So
up.
the interest rate goes, I mean, it affects the whole thing down the line.
Supply chain.
People dragging their feet.
one of
And
the
the
things,
legislature needs to understand, they gotta go somewhere else to complain, not the active.
one of the things that was really concerning for us this year too, is this bill never went to housing, general housing. Typically, a housing bill would go into the housing committee, but they only took a very small portion at the end of the session. Which-
Why?
Well, because there are
With an
people,
environment.
there are people who control committees who sit down with the leadership of the majority party and decide where it's gonna go. And so the Natural Resources Fish and Wildlife Committee,
Energy
now
and
called
environment.
Energy and Environment now, that has a chair who wants to go and does not want development. And so that bill gets worked over through like 3/4 of the session. And a little piece may go somewhere else, and a little piece goes somewhere else. The housing was one of the things. The housing was done more by the Human Services Committee.
Yeah.
Because the chairman of the Human Services Committee felt that they wanted to take care of all these poor people who were in the hotels, which were costing us $8 million a week. So that is where the housing was done. And that had nothing to do with this. but the chair of the committees and the leadership determine where they're going to go and how they're gonna deal with it. The selectman here, Brendan Deso, he went and spoke at the Senate, Natural Resources Committee. And that's a place where, again, the chair is perfectly happy. Addison County doesn't want any development apparently, because they both represent Addison County, those two chairs. And so very little gets changed. And they had all of these progressive young Democrats, brand new, don't know anything. All they want to do is spend money, and they don't want to have this kind of thing. Now,
Right, and half of your, or more than half. If you look at other, Act 250 boards around the state, we have our once or twice a year annual meetings, there we go, we have, we shoot the meetings, and we go and having presentations. Half of those boards don't want to go. You
Yeah.
just hear the talk, you're like, oh my God.
And it makes you wonder how these folks keep getting reappointed by a Republican government. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, but
well,
I mean, it just
Yeah.
makes you wonder. Like, I get you don't wanna ruffle feathers to get these folks that have maybe been in these positions for a long time, but the crisis. I guess this is like a, I see it every day. It feels like a wartime level crisis.
it is for housing, and,
It's
you gave
nuts.
some really good examples to that Senate committee.
Yeah.
A lawyer out of Burlington, Chris Roy, who does a lot of stuff with land use and a variety of these things over many, many years. He gave some examples. There was a developer who said the board's actually $50 cost, it was on the video.
Mhm.
I mean, this is a guy who builds housing and just wants it left alone. And he works really well, and he works in the system, but it's hard. And you gave examples of the farmer who doesn't want to go through Act 250, but wants to help his grandchildren build
Right.
housing on the farmland. You know, if you
But
had.
you're gonna have my example was you're gonna have a grandchild that can't find a place to live because rent's $2,000 in Enosburg of all places. And they're gonna need to buy something like a double wide from a guy like me. And the only place they can put it might be on a 1 acre lot that a grandparent carves off of 50 acres of family property that's been paid off for 50 years. And then that person's gonna need to get that grandparent's gonna have to try to subject themselves to an Act 250 permit to be able to provide their grandchild with a 1 acre house lot. And it is obscene. There's a million different examples of how this law will negatively impact people that I work with in rural Vermont on a daily basis. And I gave all those examples. And the chair of Senate Natural Resources is a nice enough individual, the chair of Fish and what is it, Natural Resources and Energy in the House now?
Energy and environment.
That's Amy Sheldon. She's the tier person, and Chris Bray in the Senate is the road rule guy. And I could sit down with Chris Bray and explain to him how I would get around that road rule law as a developer, but then he would write language in his very next bill that came before him that would stop me from doing that, so I shut my mouth. But they just like, leave it to us, we will figure out a way around it. I mean, you know how many times I bought a 30 acre field and subdivided 9 lots and had the 9th lot be like 25 acres?
I did that on my farm in Georgia. The whole rest of the farm, lot number 9, you know.
And then you come back in 5 years and a day and you submit an application for 8 more lots, so you never hit 10. I'm gonna do the same thing with that road rule. Every time I have to put in a 900-foot road, it's gonna go in pieces. And
change it now, they're telling you a secret.
well, Chris Bray's not watching the St. Albans
Yeah,
Town Selectboard meeting.
The interesting thing when they gave this presentation on the 3 tiers there,
Mhm.
I mean, you had a big screen up there, like, bigger than that. And you had guys from all over the country that worked on this. And you had there was a list of legislators and different state people that served on this board. And I'm looking it all over, and you're talking about regulating this and this land use law that, and you know, I asked the question, did you have any landowners on that committee or farmers? And the whole room goes like, oh, I guess, you know, they must have forgot about the people that they're regulating their land. So.
They generally don't invite those.
No, but I just sat there with my mouth open going, what the heck have they done? I hope he vetoes it, I hope it goes right out the window.
He'll be, okay.
Yeah.
It'll come back and it'll pass. They'll override
Oh,
it.
yeah, they're not quitting, they've been doing this every year.
Well, the worst part about it is they attached all the language that So they had the home bill come out of, Senate Economic Development last year. It was probably Keisha Ron's signature piece of legislation
Yeah.
so far, and it said, we modernized our bylaws to meet and exceed this legislation too, by the way. We had a conversation about how we would permit 4-unit buildings and decided it's a building permit by right with no, development review board approval, which was beyond the legislative intent of that bill. And then you've got other municipalities that are developed that want their nice neighborhoods that don't want, the 9-bedroom Victorian turned into 3 units with 3 bedrooms each that someone might actually be able to afford to attain and work and live and raise a family. The language that stopped those municipalities from working around the Home Act got attached to the Act 250 reform bill. So now the governor's got to make a decision around, do I want to mess up Act 250 for 97% of the state of Vermont and be able to build apartments in areas that need apartments where people are bottlenecked? Or do I want to veto the whole thing? And they basically handed him a slice of apple pie topped with manure. It's really not good. I don't know what the ruling party in Montpelier talked about when they had their leadership meetings, but it must start out with, so how are we gonna make the state worse today, just about every single time? It's not good.
Well, it ain't worse for them.
No,
Worse
they're
for
not.
everybody else.
It will be though. Someday,
Yeah, it will be.
you can't stay, I mean, can't stay out of it forever. Eventually it will consume.
And it's
Very much.
across purposes with some of the things that they say that they're really for. I mean, obviously, housing is important, and this works across purposes to housing. And, trying to keep your taxes, for instance, for your schools at a reasonable level, you have to have an increase in your grand list. I mean, there's no other way you can do it. And so it's working across purposes, and we're coming to the point now where you don't generate revenues organically in any improvement without growth of some kind. I mean, people don't want to change things. They like things the way they are. I think a lot of them owners. But they still don't want to have total stagnation. And so they're working across purposes, and it's interesting to watch because I don't think they see that,
Pretty obvious.
and then of course we have the river, the mitigation for the rivers and the river corridor development.
So they're gonna
that's-
move Montpelier higher up in the area.
Well, most of our
After how many
downtowns are on rivers.
300, 400 years, they're gonna move to town,
Yeah,
or put-
Johnson,
sandbags all along in Winooski.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the development on the river corridors, this is where most of our developed traditional habitated areas, of course, grew up. So, yeah, Montpelier is a soup bowl, Johnson is a soup bowl. I mean, you get all these things come in and that just,
So in Johnson, I just drove through there. Where that little shopping center floods out all the time. The only thing that's gone back in there is the US Post
Oh,
Office.
it's right now.
Like-
Sean.
that's better than
They
having.
can't figure out that nobody should be there. The post office went back in, they're gonna get flooded out again.
Yeah, well, the post office in downtown Montpelier has been closed and they're still trying to figure out what to do with that. So,
They got one going on there in Johnson at the very lowest point in the.
well, as far as I can see, I would recommend they just move Johnson all up to the top of the hill to Johnson State College
Yeah.
property and make a village up there.
They almost washed it away in the last flood. They had a pretty good start on it.
Actually, Montpelier, you can go to the old Vermont Junior College up on the hill where.
Johnson and, Waterbury. It's getting washed down the river.
Well, what they do is FEMA will buy the property, but you can never build anything there again. And they did that in Waterbury and Northfield and a couple of places. But that's what you need to do because they're all built in floodplains. But, it's challenging, let's put it that way.
Maybe we could touch base again like later this summer, early in the fall, and just figure out. By then you'll talk to a ton of voters, you'll know what people are they're turning you for, and I think you're gonna hear affordability in housing. So if we could help you navigate like 3 to 5 succinct legislative goals for the session, and then we could be your partners and
Yeah.
however you need our help.
Cause this summer, the July 1st, there's $100 million payroll tax coming.
Yeah.
When people start getting their municipal tax bills for the school, 14%. increase in property taxes, property tax bills across the state, people are really gonna be struggling to figure out how they're gonna pay for this. It's not, this is historic. We've never seen, a double-digit increase in property taxes like this. This at a statewide level. I sit on, I'm the ranking member on House Education. We do with policy, so we don't do with the tax stuff. We're involved in a lot of the discussion with it. And the problem that we saw is that there was no appetite for any kind of structural change to this, to our education system.
Because it's
Typically,
working so well.
well, typically you'll see about a $70 million increase. I think that's what they say. This year we saw a $243 million increase. A lot of factors, broke into that. We did change how we weight students. Some municipalities grossly overspent. I'm looking at like CVU and Mount Mansfield, those districts. They lost like 30% of their students based on their weights, and they still overspent on their budgets. So you know, and the way we fund our education system is if we don't spend here, but Mount Mansfield spends, we pick up, you know, everyone picks that up. And it becomes an inequitable system because, you know, we pass Maple Run, we're fine. Our kids are gonna be fine. We have a 9.8% increase in pupils. Is that what that?
Well,
We have a
depending
9.
on how you look at it, it's a 9.8% in the,
The CLA thing. or
Yeah,
the-
Well,
so
CLA's
we had an increased budget. We passed it as
it's a per pupil
Maple Run.
adjusted weight.
And
And so we went and raised 9.8%.
Mhm.
There was, that's not necessarily that your budget's gone up,
right,
but we actually went down with the new long-term weighting system. We went down about $98 in per pupil.
yeah.
So
But the issue that we have is we're okay in Maple Run, but Fairfax, Milton, Richford, Dale votes tomorrow. I think Milton cut 800,000 from their budget. That's gonna affect school program. It's gonna affect students. We have an inequitable system and there was no appetite to change that. And so you have winners and losers. We have a system that's set up to, if you don't spend it, you know, you're gonna spend it in the long run anyway. So, you know, Burlington wants to raise their budgets. We're gonna pick up their bill if we don't raise ours, so we might as well raise it. So it's an inequitable system. No structural change was done. The task force that we put together really won't have any answers for 3 years. And
it's all the vested interest in the schools as it is.
and then we took $96 million to buy down those rates. But I think it was 18% down to 14%. We took $96 million, and all that means is next year we're $96 million in the hole.
Time.
So we're looking at the same issue next year, but it's not an election year, so we don't have to worry about it. And we pat ourselves on the back for it, and I'm very discouraged.
So are you saying that the 10 to 20% property tax increase could be year over year?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
That's insanity.
Okay, it went up, the average is 13.8% for everybody across the board. Some
Yeah.
will be higher,
Some will be like at
lower.
6, some will be at like 30.
Yeah.
The average is only 14.
In
13.
Maple Run, for the city, town of Fairfield, it's going to be 14%. We're just a little bit above the average, which based on the stuff that we got 2 years ago when they did the long-term weighting
Okay.
proposal, we were only gonna go up 2%. That doesn't count your CLA. That's, you know, where every dollar raised is the same dollar in every community. They changed the way the CLA is gonna be adjusted in this new yield bill. But basically, originally, the Ways and Means Committee wanted to go back to what they call a foundation plan, and we had a foundation plan under Madeline Cunin. For anybody who remembers, I know Al will never remember that. Yeah, and then you were supposed to have, the gold towns didn't get very much money from the state, and everybody else would get funded to get them up to where they could afford to run their schools. Well, the state only funded that about 50%. And so if you were Sheldon and you had to have a $2.89 tax rate, you had to go and raise a lot of money. Whereas Stowe could have a 10-cent tax rate and raise a lot of money and had all kinds of money left over. So what they did when they created Act 60 is they decided that they were going to go and create an incentive on a statewide property tax where you're penalized if you are frugal. So a few years into this, when I was first in the legislature, Fairfield, I represented Fairfield and Fletcher and the town. Fletcher was a small school, so we got small school grants because they were getting, it basically was a capitation plan. You got money for each child. And they weren't getting much money because they didn't have a lot of kids. So they had small school grants. Then they had things called phantom students where if it went down 5% in any one year, you got paid for those students that disappeared even though they weren't there anymore. So they had a lot of phantom students in Fairfield. But Fairfield is, super frugal. I mean, they just squeak. And so they raised their rate up like their budget, like up 1%. But they got hit with a 26% tax increase because Burlington went up 12%. CVU went up a lot. Everybody in the state went up a lot. And it took a while for people to realize that if you saved money on your spending, you would have to pay for everybody else who raised it. I mean, you can still pay more money if you vote in a larger budget. The CLA is supposed to equalize that a little bit, but it doesn't really have as much impact as what you spend. So you're spending a lot of money, you're gonna pay more.
You
But
said
so
the-
is everybody else.
The example of, I think you said Milton's budget now, it's lower 800,000.
800,000.
My guess is-
Fairfax.
My guess is their budget went down 800,000, but the people who live in Milton are gonna pay basically the same amount.
They're
Yeah.
gonna pay a similar amount.
They're still-
Yeah.
still amount.
That plan you just laid out, or that scenario, that's what we're currently doing.
That's what we have
That
now.
sounds a lot like a race to the bottom.
It is a race to the bottom. It's
And
a race to
you
the
also
top.
have more you don't have to pay it.
Yeah,
And you kind of cost everyone, well, everyone else.
yeah.
is.
That
And now here we are.
Well, we are everyone.
School
So-
boards
Yes.
do a really good job at trying to get within where they're supposed to be because they're handcuffed. About 80 to 85% of their budget has already been determined, either by the
It's your
state.
salaries, benefits.
Salaries, benefits, and then the state has other mandates on the schools. So when they're cutting things, they only have about 15% of their total budget that they can play around with. So this system, it sets up for citizens to get mad at school boards and it divides people in towns. There needs to be a real way to look at this. I don't have the answers, but we need to sit down. We didn't talk about, we knew this December 1st letter came out, in December 1st, 2023. We didn't start talking about this till after town meeting day.
Well, really in May.
Yeah,
The last couple of weeks.
yeah.
Yeah, the Ways and Means Committee decided after this whole big brouhaha and all this stuff, they decided they were gonna go back to a foundation, like they just discovered the foundation plan.
And-
Really, I mean, that's what it was like.
That'd be great.
But it was just like the one that they had before, and then they were going to take some of the stuff that we had and kind of fine tune it so that it would be easier to pay towns that don't have. So it wouldn't be creating an unequal basis.
And then they ended up raising.
But
30
then, what the group called the V's, this is the VEA, the Vermont Association of Superintendents, the Vermont Association of Principals, the Vermont Association of School Boards, the Vermont Association of School Budget Directors, came in, they didn't like that. Their incentive or their basis is to want to keep it the way it is, because they're all making out like bandits, quite frankly. And the fact that it hurts the taxpayers or it is totally out of control. And a lot of them kept the ESSER money and the money they got from ARPA. They just kept those positions there, and that's part of the reason why the budgets all went up.
Yeah.
And they created a Ways and Means created this little trick thing in the budget that if you went over more than 5% of one piece, but you didn't go up to 10%, then you would be able to raise more money. They didn't know what they were doing. I mean,
And
quite
all
frankly.
they did was they raised 30 million in new taxes as well. We have a new cloud tax and
And
short-term rental,
Airbnb.
Airbnb,
So-
rentals. So they
That
just
was
raising more.
Yeah,
They don't call it, raising taxes, raising new revenues is how they put it.
it's an investment.
And so
Investment,
Yes.
yes.
investment and government don't go together. They shouldn't be used the same center.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's,
Sure,
this is,
beneficial.
and they've created a board to go and do a study on this, which is coming back in 3 years. But the problem is it's heavily oriented toward and tasked to the V's. All those associations are gonna be part of this. So it's like putting the hen in the hen house.
Well, if you look at the
Sorry.
folks that are probably lined up to run against you and you check their donor records with the Secretary of State's database in 3 months, you're gonna see that a lot of those associations that you just referenced are all actively contributing to their individual campaigns as well as the county committees. I mean, you've got, I call them the ruling party because that's how they conduct business. They are heavily subsidized by the Vermont NEA and every other branch associated with it. And they realize that if they pick this fight and do what's best for Vermonters, that there will be a reckoning to come the next election cycle. And they operate that way when it comes to how they receive their political contributions and how they talk about problems that we all face, like you all witnessed in not talking about this for 6 months after it became public. All because they didn't want to have to attend their town meetings and face up to their constituents for their own actions and inactions that have led to this awful situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I do think they wanted to see how town budgets on town meeting day figured out, but we saw a third, I think,
The budgets
Of
were
budgets.
intended to feed.
yeah.
And ironically, the smaller towns or the towns that are less well off are the ones who are having their budgets voted down even now, second and third and fourth time. And they're the ones who are actually often were the least
benefit.
expensive ones.
They were gonna benefit more from.
They were gonna benefit. Yeah,
But
they
they
were.
just see money, they just,
yeah. I mean, Richford Enosburg is a good example.
I think they said their cost per pupil is like $9,000 in that district.
Well, yeah, and the yield is now at, let me see, what is it at? 98.93. This is the yield for the state.
what is that? When you say-
That means the
what is
low, okay, if you're figuring you're paying, well, let's say $14,000 is the state average, just to pick a number. But that's a pretty close number. Basically, the yield is like more like $10,000. They have a yield for both the people who pay property tax and the people who have income issues or the property transfer, the property tax credit, the income sensitivity. There's one on income and there's one on something else. But the issue is that the higher the yield number, the lower the taxes, the lower the yield, the more you're gonna pay. And this is below $10,000. That's a pretty low yield. That means you're gonna pay more. It's an inverse relationship. It's not a good thing. And then, of course, we put $25 million from the surplus in the budget to help buy down this. And then there was another $76 million.
Yeah, we actually, and that's the good news, probably some of the only good news we'll deliver is we've had a lot of unexpected revenue that's gonna come through. And what happened was she talked about these bills that didn't go into the budget, but they still passed with like tax increases. We're gonna be able to use that surplus that we're getting to help buy down these other things. VHIP is a program, it's a Vermont Housing Improvement Program. That will go in, it actually helps our housing stock. If you have say you have like a 2-unit and they're both off, or you have like say you have a house and you have another unit on, but you're not, it's like, it needs to get up to code. You can get grants up to like $30,000, I think $50,000 from the
It's the
state.
governor's program, and it costs between 30, they're gonna raise it to 50,000.
So
But it's a very different thing than if you go and give money to Vermont Housing
Yeah.
Conservation and the nonprofit outfit that
So-
do people, they'll build something or redo a building and it costs like $400,000.
So like, yeah.
This is a much more cost-effective thing to do, blended properties up.
30,000 to put a housing unit on compared to $400,000.
Yeah.
And it also gets on with, usually gets on with, back on the market in about 30 days. So they cut that from the budget because it was $6 million and they're spending other things here and there, but
Yeah.
because of the surplus, we're able to get that $6 million back.
I think it was
Yeah,
extra
do that.
$1 million.
Yeah, it went
Yeah.
from 6 to a million, 6
But
million.
that's
to
a
one.
pretty successful program that we've had that the governor has been promoting the past few years, and that's, when you fund it, you get a lot of bang for the buck.
Yeah.
So,
So that's like one of the good, the things that happened this year, we are seeing some money come in, that's gonna be able to fund some of the stuff, but.
So how many more years does the state of Vermont get ARPA money and all federal, like, are we gonna feel the effect of Leahy's retirement at some point
yes,
in the state
yes,
budget?
that's the 2027.
Twenty
Yeah,
twenty-seven?
you have to be, okay, the way it works is that, and I've explained this to Sean, because you've got some ARPA money you're gonna deal with here. You have to have it obligated by December 31 of this year.
Yep.
That means that's not the state has appropriated it to you. You have to have either a grant or a contract. Once that's considered obligated. Then you have, I think, to December of 2026 to spend it and get the project finished. But it has to be finished. So with the IIJA and the IRA, that's it was the
Infrastructure and
infrastructure,
jobs.
and then the IRA is the inflation, I don't know.
Reduction.
No, it's infrastructure or something, right? Those are two bills that he gave a lot of money to. You have more of a runway with them to like 2027. But if you have any ARPA money that you have got to go and spend that you're counting on, you have to have, you're obligated with a grant or a contract this year, or the state will pull it back and put it somewhere else.
I guess what I'm asking is my understanding is, or my perception is that we're plugging holes in the budget with federal money that may disappear over
No,
time.
no, not now, not this year.
So when all this goes away and
It's starting to go
COVID
away now.
fades into the
Starting.
night, then our budgets are gonna be,
Gonna go back to
Same
the old
thing.
days. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually today, this year, with the 25 budget, it is more like what we had in previous years before COVID, before the ARPA money.
18, probably.
so what are happening to all those jobs that were created?
Well, what they did in the schools is they called it ESSER money, and they got money that they created jobs with it, but those are the jobs that are now fueling some of this increase.
You know, the ones that are gonna cut too, you gotta cut it.
Well, that's one of the, if they have a rep, they have to figure out a way to do that. The point of it is you're not supposed to be creating jobs. You're supposed to do projects. One-time money should be used for one-time things.
Is that what they did?
Yeah.
Well, we've done a lot of it under one time.
Oh,
So with the school,
Yeah.
with the school budget inflation on that, they blamed it on, there was a 14% increase in healthcare premiums. There was a lot of positions that were created with ESSER money, which stands for elementary school and secondary education relief funds. That they took those and they kept those positions with one-time funds. So then I think in Maple Road, we had like 6 or 7 that they kept, and that happened all across the state.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of new positions that stayed, that falls back on the property taxpayer once. They,
Probably $100,000 jobs plus.
well,
I'm
we
not
could
sure
turn
what they
that
were
into-
paying.
when the
but yeah,
benefits out.
benefits, yeah, 50% of it is usually
was-
benefits, yeah.
I was 13 when Governor Douglas gave his farewell address, and that was at the height of recovering from the Great Recession of the first Obama administration. And he said something that I hold close to me when I conduct my business and do things in my personal life, and that is do not spend one-time money on recurring expenses, bar none, ever. And the first thing the Shumlin administration did was delegate all of that one-time money to recurring expenses. We watched our budget balloon from 4 billion to 7 billion under one 3-term governor. And then I watched a Republican governor do the same thing with the legislature and its ruling party for the last 4 years. I saw him take one-time surplus money in the ed fund and buy down the statewide property tax rate 5 cents. He did that. It was his idea. So we have a bunch of people making policy directives at a statewide level that have been using one-time funding to solve recurring issues. And to Jeff's point, it's going to come home to roost. And the people that made these decisions and set us up for this failure that we're going to face head on are not the people that are going to take the brunt of the baseball bat wielded by rural Vermont property taxpayers who are failing their school budgets. You've got school board members that need to resurface a parking lot at MBU terribly, that have cut it from their budget. They've cut a further 800,000 up for their third vote. This is a community that had no business cutting a penny from their budget relative to other school districts in this state. And they are being made to pay for this awful policy making at the statewide level. And if there were blood on anyone's hands, it'd be on a lot of hands. But I just, we're talking about how to delegate our ARPA funds. We just had a warrant come through. We've got a one-time problem with having to digitize our land records once. And what that's gonna do for us is create a perpetuating revenue stream.
Mhm.
That's how you invest. You make an investment with government money. You put it into something that will pay you a fee in exchange for very little upkeep. I just don't understand how people, and really, I hate to say it, but on both sides of the aisle, have come together and used these ARPA funds to just create this budgetary mess that we're gonna face every year from
I just-
today to 2028.
I don't wanna be a downer as well,
Well, you've done
any
pretty
more than
well.
we already have,
You've really done a good job.
But the AOE did a study, we have not paid for school construction since
Right.
2009.
Mhm.
The bill for all deferred maintenance that across the state is gonna cost $300 to $500 million a year for 22 years.
Okay, I only point something out. And I know that our illustrious colleague here, Albo, Jill, and I were on school boards together back in the day.
Been there too.
Yeah, you were there too, yeah, you were sort of later on, but anyway, the point of it is that Act 60 passed in 1997. That is 27 years ago. It's a little more than a generation. Previous to that, we were all responsible for our own budgets, and we voted on them. And I know, when I lived in St. Albans City, and I was in the town, we voted on budgets 3 and 4 and 5 times sometimes to get them passed. This was a holdover from the fact that St. Albans City built this big new school that was 20 years ahead of its time, and people sort of went into shock and were like, we're not gonna pay for that. The point of it is that, when the foundation plan came in, that the city school had all this stuff, and the town had to figure out how to modernize their school.
You did.
And you did. The issue is that, and then of course we have BFA as an issue, but the point is that we handled responsible budgeting. We figured out what you had to cut, what you had to keep, and how we had to do it. People did get ripped, no one really wants to do that when you're on the school board, but it happens. Sometimes you gotta do it. You make choices, you make priorities. But it's been 27 years since anybody's had to do this, really, in the state of Vermont, anywhere. All your administrators are.
But the blame goes to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. The Brigham decision did require it. There are ways to go and do that without having the format that we have here. There's other ways of doing it. The issue is that we are now phasing up to the Brigham decision may not be equitable
That's right.
the way we're working with it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to really sit down and look at this. But people are just not used to being, real. I mean, there are some towns where they really are. I mean, Pownell is Pulteney is a town that only raised their budget 1%, and they're getting hit hard.
Yeah.
Richford probably, Fairfield, you name it. And there's a lot of small rural towns that are getting hit by this. But people have not had to do this for 27 years. And taxpayers have had income sensitivity, and they didn't have to worry about it because they weren't really having to pay the bill. It's coming all together all at once. And so we do have to look at a way to deal with Brigham's issue so that it's truly equitable for our schools and
Yeah.
for our taxpayers. Because the taxpayers are part of the deal. You can't just spend it all.
Cause that's the issue is we have a $2.37 billion education fund. And we have, I want to say 50,000 less students than
Yeah,
20 years ago when I was
a
in
lot of
school.
students.
And so we're seeing population like this, well, this,
That's
so we need,
population going like this and the money going.
so we need to figure this out because we do have a constitutional obligation to educate our children. But at what cost and what do we owe our taxpayers?
So when people say equitable, what does that mean? Like, I mean, I know what the definition of equitable is, but in education, is it equality of opportunity or is it equality of outcome?
Well, the question about the outcome is another question.
Neither? So what is it? Quality of dollars.
Quality of dollars.
So it's just a money thing.
You have to have enough resources. You have to have opportunity for people. Well, this is also part of Act 46, which was the consolidation of the schools back in 2016. That was when they said that we were going to try to join the small schools together, and we were going, because small schools are very nice, but they don't have the opportunity to give, they don't have the critical mass to provide the opportunity that you get in a bigger school.
Right.
Okay. You look at someone like, I'll just use it as an example. I was on a scholarship thing, and there's 126 students up at Richford High School, and there's 240 at Enosburg. They don't have the breadth of opportunity in either one of those schools to do the kinds of things that you can offer at MVU or at the FA or any other larger school. You probably need a critical mass of 400 students to be able to have enough of the opportunities available, the breadth of opportunity for the students. So that's the kind of thing that Act 46 was supposed to create. A lot of folks have hated that.
Isn't that super expensive? It's gotta be.
No, it can't be. It doesn't have to be super expensive.
To bring I mean, I guess we're getting into the weeds, but,
Yeah, you're getting really.
well, but it's a money thing, right? So you're gonna spend a lot of money to bring the same services to Enosburg or Richford that are available at BFA.
Not necessarily, you
Not
have,
necessarily.
you have a scaling up that would go and be less expensive instead of duplicating in both schools. You're duplicating things at both schools.
Right.
You put it into one larger school, for instance, this is the logic behind.
Didn't work.
And you can
That
do
didn't
it.
work. When they merged the schools and we came up with Maple Run, we were supposed to save a bunch of money. That
We
didn't work.
do it. No, we didn't do it, but the point is that
But it didn't work. So
Well, they
so to
stripped-
say that we need more conglomeration, it doesn't work.
They stripped all, and I only know this because I was interning for then Senator Degree in Senate Education at the time. They stripped all the teeth out of 46, like 3 weeks before it passed.
oh yeah, that was the, yeah, well,
I
no,
mean-
it passed, and then we all got a lot of, there was a cost containment piece of Act 46. That when the school boards thought in the fall, they all screamed bloody murder, the superintendent screamed bloody murder. And then so the following, January went back and we took that out. The way it worked is that it looked at your average cost per student. And small schools got hit really hard with this because they have the fewer students, the more costs. So $18,000 per student was you were only given a certain amount of dollar per student that you could raise your budget. I think for BFA it was $156 or something like that. Well, nobody liked that. Some schools did comply with it. But the first thing they did when they came back in January after they passed it, they took that cost cutting piece. There is a need for a cost cutting incentive, cost cutting mechanism or a cost cutting incentive. We've lost a lot of students. We were like 115,000 and now we're like to 75,000. We're just spending, we're adding people, we're adding costs, but the population's going down. It's like
And what they just passed is exactly the opposite. We have a budget increasing.
yes,
We're rewarding increases in budgets, not
yes,
decreases.
we are rewarding increases.
The ed fund is the largest fund in the state.
It's a self-funding fund. Whatever you vote on, the state has to come up with the money and they use that with the statewide property tax. The entire sales tax goes into that. They don't take it out of the general fund, they take it all from the sales tax. And so that is how they fund it, but it has, the way the statute's written, it's a self-funding fund. They can't manage.
So we're voting, right? And see if this makes sense, right? So if we're voting in Maple Run, all we're really doing is voting how much we want the state to send, basically.
How
Well,
much?
how much it's
And
gonna cost.
the aggregate of all the other 200 or whatever it is, 100 districts or whatever, they're just tallying it up. If we were the only one that raised our budget and everyone else kept it flat, we wouldn't pay really much extra, right? But if we cut our budget in half and everyone else stayed the same, we would stay about the same,
That's how. it
right?
works.
I mean, it's just Maple Run compared to everyone else, we're maybe 1.5% or something, so
That's why
our voting is 1.5%.
when you watch in the MBU school district, they're one more budget failure away from having to look at RIFs. I mean, that's.
MBU
and
was always saying-
And their budget's still gonna go.
And
They're
I'm
still
sitting
gonna be
there,
paying
you know, in my house, talking to everybody that comes through to pay their storage unit bill, vote for that budget. You don't realize how little you're helping yourself. You're going to cost kids services that they need, especially
without
post-COVID.
saving money.
With no reflection in your property.
None.
You aren't
Yeah.
saving
No.
it.
You don't
Done.
save yourself that.
Like that parking lot, that's a nightmare. And they cut $1 million out of their budget, so now it's gonna cost them 1.1 next year to do the same thing. And their budget's gonna flatline over that. And all they did was send a message to Montpelier that's got headphones on, and then take them off, look up and go, oh, cool. And they put them back on, they go back to what they're doing. They don't care. We could fail every budget in the state and that ruling party
Bring it
will
all
not
done
do a
with this
thing.
exercise and nothing's going to change. So it'll be 14%.
You have to go and change the structural
There has to be
situation,
structural
and
change.
there is no appetite among the majority to change the structural changes because the people who they listen to say, we like what we did. That's really what it is engine.
Interesting.
People
Go
who-
ahead, Al.
Yeah, it's
I don't
difficult.
think we're gonna solve this problem.
No.
Oh, I thought we were getting close. No, I'm learning about it.
Before we turn most of these people go, I think we have to be myopic and look at what's the town needs to do to have a better year next year.
Right.
And for me, I follow Brendan's logic, but I think instead of having four, we should have one goal that we want to change. And for me, that would be the designation of the town center, or the, for the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I think we need the two senators here with you.
Mhm.
Because we have to work on both sides of the building,
Yes.
both sides of the aisle. And I would like to see somehow or other the select board and you all get the two senators together and we have a meeting just devoted to how we now structure a strategy to get the whole legislature, or at least one plus, a half plus one, to get us where we need to go fiscal year, right, 26.
26 is the next year.
Yeah.
26.
I mean,
So, because I don't understand these things well, it's not my area of expertise, but so on your point, like, why wouldn't the legislature? What's the problem with doing what you just said? Like,
Jeff, you gotta think about why is it the way that it is now? And it's because the people that own the downtowns don't want the people next to them. It's the same logic that creates dumb things like affiliation fees. The people that own it don't wanna share it. They don't want the people next to them to benefit from it. So they'll write the statute to protect themselves. And in the end, all it does is harm everybody. So that's what they're gonna run up to is,
Right.
we've made considerable investments in our downtown and how dare Hardwick, take credit for it and get the benefit, and now their property is gonna be competing with ours for the same development opportunities, and it's ridiculous. And in the end of the day, we're one state of 600 some odd thousand people that is so backwards fiscally that all we're gonna do, I don't know, it's like crabs in a barrel, like just pull each other down however possible, and
It would do this community no benefit if if we became a South Burlington. In other words, put up another municipal center right next door to St. Albans City.
right.
We kill both, just like it's happening in South Burlington and Burlington itself.
Yeah.
The transition that occurred there.
I agree. Their downtown needs our growth. I think here, it's a microcosm of common sense where somebody in the city would say, and that's where I think our planning commission's working together. If they could pass a joint resolution supporting whatever language we were going after in the legislature, saying, this is an example of what happens, and this is two communities that wanna come together to fix it for our own benefit, do it statewide, or at least create a mechanism that allows us to opt to do it ourselves. I think that would be powerful, but
We have, on the planning commission, we have broached that with the city, and hopefully there'll be another meeting soon to firm that up.
that'd be great.
That was a positive note to move on. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
I hope this
Yeah.
has been a.
That's
Thanks for all the
Informational.
vegetables. I didn't sleep like a baby tonight.
It's still active 50 small.
Yeah.
Not just that.
That's good thing for your 25 kind of start out.
Well, sometimes I think I'm 21 now, I hurt myself.
Yeah, he said 1997 for Act 60, I was like, "How's seventh grade?"
Yep. Well, my wife was starting to teach when we first got married, and I remember the riffs in 94, 95.
Yeah.
They were riffing people.
Oh, yeah.
People were getting pink slips.
I was
Yeah.
on board in 94 and we had a budget went down, we had to cut 300 or 400.
And then,
Yeah.
you're right, it all went away.
Yeah, it all went away,
All
you
went
know,
away.
it's like, it wasn't my problem anymore, and what it did, there were projections. I mean, Art Wolf, the economist, predicted that this would get out of hand, that there would be all kinds of money spent on it. And it's taken us a while to see it, but.
Is
you
he
know,
still around? He was a
he's
professor
retired.
around UVM.
Last year or 2 years ago.
He retired?
Yeah, you retired a while ago,
Oh, yeah, a few years.
yeah, a few
He
years
was
back,
a
but-
good guy.
Well, he did the
was-
report on Northwestern Vermont's role in the state economy, right? I think that was it. Sorry, it's a nerd moment there, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but
anyway.
so far, we've had good luck in that the state's economy has held up, and we have revenues coming in. We're bound to have something,
That's right.
She planned another one for next year.
You get an annual thing.
With the debt that's in the Maslin Center Sears, how is that going to affect next year's legislature? I know you don't know who's gonna get
well,
voted in.
Jane
but
Kitchell,
There's already-
Bobby
Jane
Starr.
How's that going to affect the operations that you anticipate next year?
Well, it depends on who gets elected to replace them. And it depends on if there's a lot of progressives that go up there. We have some hardcore progressives who went from the House up to the Senate and they,
It'll be interesting because Jane Mitchell was, chair of appropriations,
Appropriations.
so that's gonna change whoever gets that spot.
Yeah.
We saw, last year we saw this legislative session, 46 new members.
In the House.
In the House out of 150, so a third of the turnover. And we did see a lot of change. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of new bills that were pretty, I would call radical that came out, but, you're gonna see a different legislature next year. Those are hundreds of years of service, just from those 4 people that we mentioned, that are not running anymore. Bobby Starr and Jane Mitchell and.
That's gonna, Bobby Starr getting done for agriculture can be huge.
Yeah.
And the wheels are gonna
fall off unless someone gets on that board.
And I don't think we have any farmers.
no,
Left
well,
because
Rodney Graham is in the House.
Ronnie Graham is not running for reelection and Henry Pearl,
Henry Pearl from Danville.
he's not running either. So dairy farmers, there's no dairy farmers left.
Well, Jane Kitchell grew up on a farm up in Danville.
Yeah.
Her family's farm. And she was very fiscally responsible. You know, she was the head of she was the Secretary of Human Services,
That was Kitty's sister.
Kitty's sister, yeah.
So the people, the turnover, is that because people are just getting worn down?
I want to say this last set, and I'm not the only one saying this, Senator Brock said it on the radio, Governor Scott said it on the radio as well. This was probably the worst session that I've been there 3 terms, 6 years. And this was the hardest year that I've ever had to be in there, and I know people that have been there for 15, 20 years said the same thing. It was really unorganized. Like I said, when we had 100 bills that passed, 60 of them in the last week and 38 on the last day.
That's no good.
So we're like, what were we doing for 5 months before this last week? Why couldn't we get these out? There wasn't a sense of urgency. They held on to bills. Bills weren't going to the right committees, like we mentioned, the housing bill never went to housing. It was very tough year for a lot of legislators, and I think this 14% increase in property taxes is going to weigh on a lot of people's decision if they wanted to run and face the music next year, or this November.
I think we're seeing it in a national discussion for another day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
No, but thank you for being willing to subject yourself to what 5 months down there must feel like. I mean, we do appreciate it.
We appreciate what you do too.
Yeah.
I really think that's how-
Spending your Monday night and that stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you. We had nothing else coming.
The old town hall would be like 87 degrees right now.
Oh, like
We'd be like,
Weird, you're not.
rebroken.
Stay here all night.
Yeah. The rest of the reports is 3 Act 250 things, American Sign, there's a new group finally closed on Highgate Commons, so they've got some big names coming in there to fill that out. And that is all I have.
Hey, stores, you're saying? You don't have to say the names, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's public knowledge, but
So
it'll be open by the end of
I
the
see
summer.
they're working on the sidewalk up there on,
Route 7,
Yep,
south.
south.
got one going.
Yeah, and the one for Route 7 North, the scoping study's underway. So we walked out with the city and with the consultant a couple weeks ago.
Yep, I have a question related to Route 7 North, because we had a very contentious select board meeting with the Route 7 North Study Committee like 3 years ago. And we indicated that there was like zero support coming from the board at the time to fund anything related to that.
Mhm.
We indicated that we have a stretch of rail trail that could be lit.
Yeah.
That could connect into Franklin Park West, which is supposed to have a path that is supposed to connect to some existing pedestrian infrastructure in our growth center around Price Chopper, and that we would like to see connectivity between existing sidewalk infrastructure, but that a wholesale from the town line out to Walmart would never happen as a matter of first order of business when we have a bunch of other pedestrian infrastructure that probably needs to be built first. When I heard that come back up again, I was like, did something change or are we?
We got a grant for the study, that's basically
Okay.
what it was.
So that's
Yeah.
all it is. We're gonna get it, we're gonna figure out what it looks like and
And
we're
we
gonna.
piggyback with the city.
Yeah,
And with
it's,
a
yeah,
group.
it's with the city, yeah.
We were just one of.
I just remember saying like, it was gonna cost, there was a.
There's a
well,
growth center to reference our other conversation, so it also just, in the long run, will be there, but.
Well, we didn't, like, it was a $7 million price tag at the time for the vision that the committee proposed. And it basically was supposed to make Route 7 look like Sheldon Road with sidewalks on both sides of the roads and green space medians and trees. And we said, for $7 million, we'd rather fund a GMTA bus out of our pockets every year and pay for the people that would be using that sidewalk. You know, the favorite thing that the committee at the time used to say to pull at our heartstrings was, you know, we need people to work in the growth center and they come from the city and they have to walk. And my thought was, if it's gonna be -10 in January and it's gonna cost $7 million, I'd rather fund a bus or some other form of public transportation that has a little bit more dignity associated with it.
It's a wild price tag, yeah.
Well, then we kind of
Route
moved
7
on.
South
From that.
is
So as long as you know that,
350, yeah.
being that you weren't here at the time
Yeah.
that that discussion happened and you're
Yeah.
able to kind of pull back on the reins of the scope of the overall project to keep the price tag in line with what
Yeah.
might be in the realm of reality, I think
I
that would
would.
help.
Yeah, if I, that, yeah, I would have the same reaction with the $7 million price tag.
I don't think I'm misremembering that either. Does that sound right?
We did, I know we moved it, it was previously #1 on that list, and it got moved somewhere, I don't know, in the middle, and the other projects we did get. I don't know, that part I don't remember.
Yeah.
More than a year ago,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, yep.
Okay, anybody have any other business?
I do have a question that I forgot to ask, whether they were here, maybe Sean can answer, like this municipal code of ethics.
Yes.
Does this supersede what we already have? Like, is it, we have to just like put this in? Cause the state of Vermont says this is what we have to do, even if we think ours is better. Don't know if they're even different, I don't know, but so this is,
Not a whole lot. There's no disclosure of confidential information or anything.
but this is what we have to use.
You're gonna have a state mandated training that we all have to take by September or something of 2025. The law goes into effect on passage, certain parts of it not until January 1st.
July 1, 2025.
Yeah, there are a couple different dates floating in there, but you have to take there's a ethics course that's gonna be developed by the new ethics commission that's gonna tell you. Basically, if you read the text, you have gone through the training, but they're gonna probably pay a consultant $15 to make you sit through it. And then everybody that gets elected next year for the first time will have to take it within so many days. So,
From what I see, I don't think it's much different than our code of conduct. we have
Probably
now.
is.
it's not.
But it's like, I think it's more fit for like the smaller towns that don't have,
Yeah.
you know, like the chair is doing the town administration and, you know, the hiring and like all that, like, I think that's some guide down for.
Yeah.
From what I read.
Good. Oh, I was just wondering.
I
Okay.
would still have I would have our town lawyer compare our present policy with this law, see what adjustments might, I don't think to rewrite it, there might be some
Well,
paragraph.
there's a lot of like, there's some whistleblower protection
Yeah.
from the statewide level. And I don't know that our policy is like entirely in line with that, the spirit of that, but. The one thing you could do is if the lawyer reads it and says it's pretty duplicative, is just repeal our policy and cite the state statute on a one-page policy that says we will follow the state statute. Read it and be trained on it.
Yeah, I mean, either way, we have to. So,
Yeah, I mean, Dylan's rule, okay, this is what you get, that's what we've got,
yeah,
so.
Okay, next, select board meeting is Monday, June 17th and Monday, July 1st, starting at 6:30. The town offices will be closed on Wednesday, June 19th for Juneteenth holiday. And then tomorrow night here at 6 o'clock, the stormwater meeting.
it's more Tanglewood neighborhood.
Oh, it's in the Tanglewood?
No, it's
It's
here.
here, right?
It's for the stormwater
For the
project
Tanglewood?
at Tanglewood,
Okay.
yeah. 6:30, it's at 6:30.
Oh, 6:30.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought I read 6 somewhere.
No.
Okay. Be early,
Be
and
here.
be late.
I know. Is there a meal that's being provided at 6? Is that it?
It can be.
Maybe.
Yeah. I like my steak.
I'll come here.
Mill River Brewing, yeah. Bring stuff.
Okay, perfect. Would somebody like to make a motion to go into executive session at 7:56 PM to discuss a contractual and personnel matter where premature and general public knowledge of the subject matter would place the town or person involved at a substantial disadvantage?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Recording stopped.
See you tomorrow.